Well met, lords and ladies, Jacob Butter speaking, and a windy welcome to this week's Walking Wednesday. The wind just started, so I'm hoping that I don't sound too muffled already. So, another week where I would have said not much had happened if it weren't for the fact that, my birthday actually occurred a couple of days ago. Yep, strong winds today. I'm even in the forest, so I should have some of it muffled, but no promises, of course. Anyway, what I was saying, not much actually happened on my birthday itself. We do have some plans, potentially. Like, for example, actually, there's a Gilbert and Sullivan performance that starts today that we were considering going to. There's also, I think, a murder mystery of some kind. So, I need to, I guess, touch base on which one of those we're actually going for because honestly, I'm happy with either one. Never seen a Gilbert and Sullivan performance myself, so we'll be very interested in the Godalming Operatic Society, the ones that that I actually saw, advertised while I was doing, the panto. Actually, they had a whole, the whole piece about their history and whatnot. Apparently I have a new president every year now compared to every 5 years. Don't know what happened there. Anyway, so what was I saying? Yeah, so speaking of the panto, actually, I do have a little bit of news regarding that, because, plenty of you have been asking me about the digital download, which, I promised to share once that was actually available. And yes, there's been some news on the group chat. The DVDs are all available. Download I thought would be done sooner, but I guess they're going to distribute them around the same time as each other. So I suppose I'm going to have to wait a little bit longer for that. Actually, there is another option to actually see the pantomime if you're local, that I have to run by them. I'm not sure about this, but I think I remember that they mentioned a premiere that they were planning to do at some point, they basically just of the recording, so that we could all see the panto in better quality than the probably 240p 4:3 aspect ratio TV that we had in the changing rooms. In fact, now that I think about it, I'm sure that they probably had another TV of similar quality for the kids. Otherwise, I guess they would have been confused too, or the chaperones would have had to just kind of eyeball everything of the show, of course. Didn't think to ask, so who knows? Maybe the kids haven't seen the whole thing at all. There's a possibility of that. And of course, no one's seen the whole thing at all from our perspective, because of course we were in it. So some scenes we missed entirely, I suppose. The premiere is meant for us in that sense, and as I guess another victory lap, post after party and all of that stuff. And the reason I bring this up is because I don't remember exactly, but I think during that discussion +1s were mentioned, and and I got an email saying that there was some plans for or they were trying to decide what actual date it was. There was a poll on our WhatsApp group chat, and I think they settled on a date, actually. Although that went in the other social event we were doing in terms of the traitors, apparently, sometime in March. So that's, I guess, still to be decided, but there is going to be a premiere on one of 4 possible dates. As soon as I find out about that, I will ask if there can be, other guests that can go there, if it's just for us. Because I know that there are some people that missed out on the chance to go to the performance, if they would be so inclined to see it on I guess, not the big screen, but more like a medium screen, I imagine. Speaking of which, I wonder if I have to set that up. That's going to be fun. But to anyone else, I guess they're still working on the downloads, and I don't think it would take this long, but maybe they're just working really, really hard on the editing and polishing of the sound and everything, and the fine-tuning and color grading. Probably not. I don't imagine. I don't imagine. I think we only had one camera as well, so not like gonna get like many cuts between different shots, Star Kid style. So don't expect that if it comes out. So yeah, that's it in terms of I guess other big updates that are non-internet related. In the internet related ones, Final Break happened this week, and I know I don't talk about that one a lot myself, but I know that it's caused particular buzz in of itself. In fact, the advertising alone enticed a lot of people with the animated trailer. I can appreciate when a trailer works, despite my personal avoidance of them. Actually, no, it wasn't a trailer. It was the animated open auditions. Because yeah, as I guess with the release of this episode, my involvement with that has gone down to a minimum. Actually, I'm pretty sure that we have. I don't think I have covered like all of the script, or I've gone through everything yet for the other ones. But that was kind of like my role with Aiden. We were script advisors, as well as I was in the show itself for one episode. One of my characters, obviously like departed the school, and the one departed this mortal coil. Spoilers. So yeah, that happened. So yeah, I'm not sure, what the future holds apart from, I guess, more recent releases. Given that Bon, who is doing all of the animation, has promised that since now he's not doing Secrets of the Plex, and now that he's left Yukiso, he's got that he's got more time to dedicate to this particular project. Although, I mean, I know Secrets of the Plex is going to restart at some point, because of course, I was asked if I would want to be on board for that for a future season, which of course I accepted immediately. Not saying as what yet, because if you've seen the series, you know that certain things happened, so I'm not going to specify about that. Nor am I going to specify much about Final Break, because of course, as a mystery series, a lot of it revolves around, the twists and whodunits and everything. And so yeah, it was one of those things where in the review I was being very careful of what I actually said. Discussing like either future things or, just what was going on. So yeah, I guess that became much more of a focus on even the technical side of things. It's one of those things that even, ironically enough, the link between like Bon and Yukiso actually. One thing that I believe that New said after I viewed the latest Kessler episode on the server was that she made sure to commend a lot of the backgrounds and fight sequences, because I wasn't saying that much about them during the actual review, which is true enough. To some extent I wasn't doing that, partly either because New had lots of like behind the scenes info about certain backgrounds, ones that sometimes she did herself, others that were done by other people, depending on which one in question, but also because you know, that's one thing about gacha review, that if I keep saying the same thing over and over again with no variation, the review itself isn't interesting. So, you know, if I keep saying things like, yes, this is good, this is good, this is good, and not like I can comment too much on, you know, on art in general. I try my best, but, you know, it took me a while in gacha review when it first started to get the hang of commending visuals of any kind. Partly because I was unfamiliar with the techniques, but partly also because I just simply didn't know what to say. And of course, you know, Bond did warn everyone that I was very story focused, so, you know, the fact that I was not saying too much about the story in episode 1 was a good sign. Episode 3 is another matter, but yeah. So this time it was kind of the opposite. I had to restrain myself talking about the story of Final Break, and, you know, use like all that time to talk about visuals. But again, same issue occurs, because the backgrounds are all from The Sims, which is a technique I haven't seen applied since technically me, because Ghosty filmed a bunch of backgrounds in The Sims and then vectorized them in Fire Alpaca for Music God Season 3. But, you know, even despite that, what was I going to say? You know, the other person who did that was Monet. I mean, partly because the cutscenes in the project of puppetry were to do with were using Sims characters, somewhat confusingly, considering that gacha is also a thing that can adopt certain actions. But I guess the gacha is used more for more dialogue, for more, I guess, like freedom of expression. I think that was the idea. But yeah, like mostly it's the thing that, you know, I guess within our circle seems to pop up. But I like the idea. I guess it was pointed out that you know, even though these backgrounds were not vectorized, thank you, they were you know, they were consistent to each other, because it's all, you know, the whole thing takes place in, you know, one location, the school. So there's no need to you know, I guess construct like more elaborate backgrounds and everything to focus on what's in there, which is a very theatrical technique, of course. You know, I feel like M's background in theatre showed quite a bit in that procedure, because, you know, of course there are lots of stage plays that take place in one location, and usually when you're studying those things for either GCSE or A-level or things like that, you end up you're saying things like, yes, it's all symbolic of the claustrophobia that we hear, you know, Journey's End by R.C. Sheriff, it's all takes place in this one officer's dugout, and we only hear verbally about what happens outside, because, you know, this is their one place of respite. They're also stuck in the trenches anyway, so it feels even more confined on purpose. Or, you know, La Casa de Bernarda Alba with, you know, the Habitación Blanquísima, the super white room that everything takes place in when they're, you know, different times, just because it's, you know, they're still confined to their house, you know, because that's part of the morning thing, but also they don't want to let anyone in to see what they're really like, and this is the inside peek, and etc., you know. So it happens a lot, and I'm sure that that's part of it, but let's be honest, a lot of these plays are filmed in that way to save on set building. Like, let's just say that as it is, you know. You know, if you put everything in one location, you don't have to deal with, you know, too many scene transitions. You don't have to, you know, have any, like, you know, dead air during the performance, or no more than is, you know, intended thematically or whatever. So it works out in both ways. I even remember actually that You know, remember when I did Siren Story at uni and I talked about that process? Well, Siren Story had one thing that distinguished it from every other production that was put on, with the exception of you know, I say whatever the exception, but yeah, like, I mean, aside from the original song lyrics, you know, and instrumentals. Well, there were source instrumentals, but they were, you know, put together originally. Anyway, and the difference was that, you know, I actually had scenes that took place in different locations. You know, we actually did have to do transitions. You know, there were scenes that take place like in the open sea, in the beach, by the lighthouse, inside of a restaurant. You know, and the reason that's different is because I was the only one who switched from the directing module to the writing module at uni to do the festival. Because what happened in our final year was we were supposed to choose a module to try out, you know, that was either acting, writing, or directing, and to hone in our skills in that particular area. And so, you know, because I have done plenty of acting and writing in my life, chose directing. Yes, I did some voice directing before that point anyway, because music had been running for like 2 years at this point. But, you know, it wasn't the same. It wasn't quite the same. So, you know, I decided to give a hand at directing. So I did that for a bit. Turns out I did not like it very much. You know, these things happen. Sure, fair enough. What does one do in that scenario? Well, switch over back to writing as soon as you know, the staff start talking about the idea of doing an ensemble piece, and you happen to have an ensemble piece that could easily be adapted, you know, from the stage to from gacha to the stage, with you know, a little bit of you know, trimming here and there, and then, you know, the rest. Obviously, the rest is history. I've talked about that process a lot before, but you know, that's unique entry into the writing into the writing chair, basically. You know, meant that I had actually missed out on what everyone else was doing. Because, yeah, for a while, I remember that somebody said, okay, you know, they're doing a writing module. I think I was actually part of this in second year. That was called The Room. Not based on the Toy Was So movie, but the idea, like, a play taking place inside of one particular room. You know, the room could be anything, really. And looking back, the piece that I directed all took place inside just the kitchen with this particular family that's, you know, running a restaurant. And their family sort of started falling apart, basically. And all of that was in that particular space. But yeah, like I didn't realize, like, yeah, there was a continuation, what they were doing, of the Room project that I was briefly a part of before lockdown started, and I guess a lot of things shifted after that point. So I didn't end up covering it that extensively. And just as well that I didn't, because Siren Story would not have worked out if that were the way that we, you know, went about doing things. What else? Yeah, so, but everyone else who had done the writing module, who had also done the continuation of The Room, then did every single piece of theirs inside of that one space. And that is where the difference came in. You know, I guess Siren Story also is then in play with an interval. That was also partly, that was also true. But that was, I guess, a coincidence. I don't know. That had nothing to do with the module, unless it was meant to be a one-act play for them as well. I don't know. Yeah. So again, I get from that perspective, like, how someone could, like, you know, work within that limitation. It turns out that the writing teacher was also the tutor was also a bit of a control freak, according to a lot of the student testimony that I got, and then, you know, kept on either changing certain things because he didn't think they were effective, or, you know, didn't quite get the grasp of the story. And as somebody who, you know, dealt with the tutor who didn't get the scope of Siren's story, what the point was in general, or I guess was looking for something a bit more with like a much more like grounded idea, or, you know, somewhat fantastical but not entirely like the same length of what I was going for, you know, compared to the other tutor who knew it was based on an animated project, and, you know, thought, oh, this is like a very animated movie. It's like, ah, yes, thank you. So, you know, I get that from their perspective. I'm pretty sure that Emily did this all subconsciously, though. You know, the idea of a confined space, I mean, obviously for the plot of the series, you know, the students being trapped in this area, you know, that kind of has to be the setup. But it also worked for for set building and for set consistency at the same time. It's one of those things that definitely comes out of either, like, you know, a sense of familiarity, or, you know, in the case of other playwrights, convenience, and but also efficiency. So it all kind of worked out, and you know, unintentionally, you know, paid homage to the theatrical train that she's got of all of these ideas that have come from years before. And speaking of ideas that came from years before, that's the other thing I wanted to talk about that I was considering making this stream about. Not the stream, this Walking Wednesday. Why did I say stream? Because, yeah, I thought about this interesting idea regarding What's Up Unicorn and Evoli LPS, or Evoli LPs, I'm not sure how to pronounce that yet. You know, when we're doing stream last night. Because yeah, that they actually, surprisingly, they're two sides of the same coin in a way that I hadn't thought of until like during that moment, and I didn't want to derail the review too much. But yeah, there is something about them that I can see they're starting from a similar place and end up going on a bit of a diverging path. Now, so if you don't know who Evoli LPs is, they are the creator of Believer and Gasoline, you know, easily one of my favorite gacha series of all time that we've been covering recently on Gacha Review. And they actually recently, during the editing stream that we did for Mutant Girl a few days ago, they actually sent me that day a PDF of their responses to every episode, what we said in the videos, and the timestamps and everything. And I still got to go through those, because, you know, you got to appreciate that level of engagement from someone, and, you know, continued enthusiasm despite the fact that you know, our episode 5 thoughts were not as praising as previously, but still sending things over regardless. It's, yeah, watching Believer and Gasoline is a very interesting thing, because that series feels like what a classic gacha from, you know, from the heydays of the community would have looked like, or could have looked like, because, you know, the idea of a demon and angel hybrid is nothing new under the sun, less still in the gacha community, because it was one of those tropes that kept on appearing over and over again. It was one of those stories that was repeated in more or less the same fashion, of you know, either demon and angel fall in love, you know, two households, both alike in dignity, yada yada. They end up fleeing to Earth together. Their child gets caught in a, you know, a family war between the two sides, and etc, etc, you know. Which, there's the wind again. I don't know if the trees are covering now. Yeah, which on paper you can probably get like a decent story out of it. A decent story, not the repeated ones that we kept on getting year after year. You know, well, day after day, really, at some points. So, another one of those gacha tropes that was sort of a wasted opportunity. But you know, in comes Evoli, and instead of fast forwarding, well, it's a little bit fast forwarding actually. Instead of like, you know, having the I guess the lead up to the conception and birth of the child be the major like, you know, like inciting incident for the series, or well, I guess it technically was behind the scenes, but you know, we don't cover that. You know, there's an idea of like how demons and angels came to be. They don't just exist. They manifested from mutations, actually, from the moon and the sun in themselves, and that had an effect on, you know, all of human civilization before they eventually split into like the 3 different kingdoms. And you know, and honestly a very you know, realistic depiction of like how you know, each group deals with, you know, the rights of the other within their territories and etc. It's and the evolving attitudes of, you know, the individual characters, but also the society as a whole. It's really, again, one of my favorites. Is quite fascinating. And the main character is actually not the hybrid, but you know, the hybrid's older brother and caretaker, trying to you know, shield her as best he can, you know, doing what is in his limited power. And I like when characters have limited power to do things, because you know, the digital hybrid is also quite overpowered but has to suppress that. You know, that classic thing would have been generic if it had been from her perspective, but because it's from, you know, the brother's perspective, there's a lot to actually deal with, a lot of the sense of helplessness and desperation, but also putting on a brave face that goes into that character. Not to mention episode 2 being a better introduction than episode 1, really. It was, you know, again, you know, all the little details of, you know, the actual timelines, the geographies of the world, and the fashion senses within gacha, which is not easy to pull off. And just, you know, everything about it. So yeah, that's definitely an idea that, you know, like I said, evolved from a classic, but was taken in this particular direction and, you know, was elevated. I don't know how long Evoli has been doing gacha series for. And so they were surprised that, you know, like their series, like, you know, got this far, basically, which is normally talk from a newcomer to the community, but obviously not exclusively. You know, obviously things can happen later down the line. I'm not denying this. But yeah, there's a lot to do with that, where you know, I don't know. I've got to check their channel more thoroughly. But I definitely get the sense, I'll check the PDF to confirm this, I definitely get the sense that they have at least consumed gacha for a long time. And I guess while they weren't, you know, the PDF does say that they didn't have a full script or series outline when episode 1 came out, and it definitely shows in episode 1. You know, they clearly have the storytelling know-how to pull something off now compared to before. I don't know if they decide to wait or to, you know, I guess like flex their muscles, or they checked on the back catalog. I don't know. I need to, you know, hopefully they said like next time they might be able to join the review. So again, I will check to find out. But yeah, the reason I say this is because it feels like a video that was done, or series that was done by someone who's been around from the beginning, that has, you know, that still likes the old tropes, but realizes their, you know, their hidden potential. Which brings me to What's Up Unicorn, the other side of this coin that I mentioned earlier. What's Up Unicorn is a classic gacha tuber. You know, no ifs, ands, or buts. They've been around for, quite some time, since at least 2020, but maybe like a little bit further back, I think. Either way, their back catalogue is extensive, especially for someone who dabbles in videos that sometimes approach 2 hours of runtime, which for gacha is monumental. Emphasis on the mental part of monumental. So yeah, that's part of it. And the fascinating thing about like What's Up Unicorn, you know, is that whenever you know, I like when someone pushes the limits of gacha. Like I said before, part of what, you know, I wanted to do when I started making gacha videos was, you know, I didn't think people had quite embraced the, you know, the potential of the app. At least not what I'd seen. At this point, I'd only really seen Jay and Natasha's videos, plus a couple of others here and there that they were sending me. And I was like, really? And then, of course, Afnao came along, you know, showed how the animated mouse would work, the animated poses, how the editing could be pulled off, you know, basically like so many different things that, you know, I had not thought of around that time. I was like, if no one else is doing this, you know, I want to do this, you know, because I've always wanted to, you know, write an animated show of some kind. You know, I've loved animation for, you know, for as long as I can literally remember. And if you know me, that's a long way back. So, of course, I've been intrigued by that idea for, you know, basically my entire life. So yeah, I wanted to explore that and also, you know, see what I could do, like test the limits of gacha, which I still, you know, still doing to this day, to the best of my ability, testing like my limits as well as a creator, like what I can do with things. But that also involves, in my case, post-production, because of course, unlike most gacha tubers, I was not starting out from scratch with video making. I had, you know, about 5 years under my belt of these things. So, you know, I looked at one tutorial for green screening, used the rest of what I knew, and, you know, made a voice acting series at a time where there were almost none of them. And well, I mean, again, the rest is history, you know, from watching the videos that, you know, how those things have gone over time. But yeah, I bring this up because, you know, from my perspective, pushing the limits of gacha involved post-production. Like, I saw that gacha had certain limits, or ones that I perceived it to have, and chose to and chose to use my, you know, my YouTubing, I guess not really prowess, my YouTubing knowledge to my advantage. What's Up Unicorn didn't really do that. You know, they basically have stuck to the primary way that gacha was made before, which was, you know, mostly just screenshots, you know, a rudimentary editing software, and the case of a lot of classic gacha tubers, you know, they had, you know, some music from like their services they could, like, if they already provided them, or something, so they don't have to download them, you know, one track, you know, a lot of that stuff. What's Up Unicorn doesn't have any sound of any kind, which definitely holds the videos back. Despite how popular they are, they could be even more popular, I reckon, if they had, you know, if they had a soundtrack to them. But yeah, like that, the evolution of What's Up Unicorn, it seems to me, comes entirely within the apps of gacha themselves. You know, like most backgrounds are, you know, use props to the maximum potential, which most people don't bother with, or like they make custom ones instead of the ones in gacha itself. The screenshots, even with like walking cycles, they seem, you know, mostly okay. The actual, you know, the actual the videos, they feel like they're written to be episodic, but they just end up, you know, being combined in like a movie edit of a show that just happens to be the actual movie. But yeah, all of that, with like a couple of angles here and there, maybe for comedic effect, most of that is, okay, test the limits of gacha, push it to its max, but within the app itself. Which is a great idea for a challenge, and one that I have actually thought of before. Well, somewhat. I thought of like doing videos where I tried out Gacha Studio and then, you know, well, I did Gachaverse at one point, like one video in Gachaverse, but, you know, an idea of like, you know, using my knowledge now, again, with post-production, what could I make in those apps specifically? You know, it's a bit of like an experiment idea. But yeah, never something that was like, oh yeah, what's the max that can be done with just gacha? I think that's because, again, you know, with just gacha, you end up with no soundtracks, and, you know, to some degree, depending on, I guess it's more like a what's been called like writing perspective, meandering plot points. But then you also end up with story-wise, again, based on some of the old tropes. Again, the one that I one that I've criticized the most, which is because it's been the most relevant in recent years, the soul bond trope, which is the idea that through some mystical energy manifesting through a magical string, two souls can be tied together in a particular way or something, and you know, it takes out a lot of the guesswork regarding the regarding what was I going to say? Yeah, regarding, like, you know, finding a partner. And I watched a video by Hello Future Me literally the day before I watched, like, you know, Your Hours Part 3, which was the What's Up Unicorn video we're working on. And what was I going to say now? And yeah, like, a perspective, you know, that he had was that, you know, the soul bonds in fantasy in general, you know, again, he's not a gacha tuber, so this isn't specific to the gacha community, but like the idea of a soul bond in general can be comforting to people because, you know, love can hurt. You make yourself very vulnerable. You open yourself up to a person that could either hurt you, or you decide in, you know, days, months, weeks, years to come that, you know, you don't want to be with anymore, or they want to be with you, or and you feel like you've, you know, wasted years of your life potentially. Or, you know, that person now has the potential to, you know, if they lash out, to hurt you in such a way that you never want to open yourself up again. Like, those things can happen, and that's a scary thought. And the idea that somebody who's out there that's, you know, meant to be, you know, compatible for you was always destined to be with you. Like, I get that, you know. It's why, like, the whole, like, their fates were intertwined, for it was written in the stars, and blah blah blah. Why that's always such an encouraging thought. Which, yeah, you know, would be if the tropes were, you know, dealt with in such a way where the characters don't seem incompatible at first, if they meet before their soul bond actually happens, or if there was a sense that, you know, the society had like a voluntary idea that someone could actually set up for this, so they could actually, you know, again, consent to the idea. You know, or if, well, actually, there are several other things. I realize where I am right now. I'm going to return. Yeah, there's a lot of scenarios like that where you think, oh, wow. And yeah, What's Up Unicorn kind of forces that a little bit, but once the characters who were, you know, incompatible at first, the idea behind them is that they actually have a sense of, you know, bonding naturally over time before they decide to make their relationship official, which is, again, fine. The one thing that didn't need to be montaged away from this long video we were subjected to, but whatever. Yes, well, but yeah, it's I don't know. It's What's the video controls has it like both ways, incidentally, where they think, you know, they have like a few moments of, you know, the indulgence of a different variety, you know, where you know, like the main character has to submit, and they say, well, you know, classic. The video is called Your Hours, of course, so you know, they try to be more possessive and in control because, of course, you know, they're also royals, or say royals because of the spelling, but they're royals, they're princesses, so of course they must be the ones to call the shots and yada yada. Now think about it, in theory, you know, Dane could flip the switch on them if he wanted to, but he hasn't done it. Anyway, so yeah, it's just one of those things where, like, you know, and again, that this video, the Your Hours one, you know, came out in 2023, I think, and by that point, most gacha videos, well, the gacha community itself had, you know, lost a lot of its members, you know, even despite the production quality being upped, they, you know, it decreased in viewership. But it's one of those videos that has, I think I'm pretty sure it actually got like 2 million views, I think, in 2023, which is extremely impressive. Again, it's a shame there's such missed potential because it could have gone so much further than it already did. What's Up Unicorn has a legacy that keeps being revitalized, even despite videos saying, you know, my channel is dead or something like that a couple of times. And the video is better than My Shimmering Husband in the sense that it doesn't meander as much, doesn't repeat itself as much. There's a lot of plot to get through, and, you know, 2 stories that could have been separated, in theory, but, you know, it's an earlier video. I was going to say a step in the right direction, but it's an earlier video than My Shimmering Husband, which did not capture the magic in the slightest. This one, I kind of get it, but, you know, as far as like evolutions from the classics, I definitely prefer the Evoli approach. You know, take the basic idea, but shift it so that it's, you know, as far away as possible. And that's what I wanted to do with like gacha tropes at the time. That's why my first gacha video was a hated girl video, but it was a music video. The girl's hatred was self-inflicted because of how spoiled she was. And, you know, I tried to take it in a different direction entirely. Because originally that's what I thought of doing in gacha, was taking a bunch of these tropes and, you know, unlike Aphmau parroting them and, you know, trying to like making fun of how silly they were directly, flip them on their heads to see what they could have been. That was my idea. And the music got happened and, you know, things took off in a different direction. But yeah, you know, I wanted to be subversive. Again, that Akira Toriyama inspired writing coming through. But hey, glad to see that some people are doing this kind of thing in their own way, to different degrees of efficacy. You know, go ahead and check them out if you want, see which one you prefer. And please leave a like or dislike because your opinion matters. As I've done so already. And on that note, until next time, farewell.